Let's talk about S1 Tomb of Horrors by Gary Gygax, one of the most famous modules of all time. It's 32 pages, of which only 12 are text. It's a very short module. It has a map, and it has an illustration on this side, and it has a 20-page set of illustrations, which number in total 33 and a half, 33, more than that. There's 27A and 33A, so I have to assume that there are more than that number of illustrations. Very famous as a player killing module. Is it John Wick? Someone can correct me if I'm slandering John Wick, but who has written a fairly famous story of a convention, or was it his home game? And I think it's convention, and just horrible DMs trying to kill everyone in a way that's obviously antagonistic. And often seen also, as a unnaturalistic or unfair module with wild and unreasonable traps. And basically most of that I don't think is true. And this isn't controversial to people who watch my videos. Probably your people who are your connoisseurs. But particularly in the OSR, it's a respected module. But I think it's worth thinking about the process that led to it being written, and what it is, and to understand anything that goes after. So, because there's not as much to talk about for the module itself, it's a fairly smallish dungeon. It's 33 rooms or something. I think we can we can spend some time doing this. This is what Gary says. The module starts title page with a very quick description of what it is. Legends of the Tomb, including 6 possible places it could go in your World of Greyhawk campaign, and then notes for the Dungeon Master, and then a start section. And that's all pretty de rigueur so far, and then the key runs all the way to the end, and then there's the cover as well for extra info. The notes to the Dungeon Master is what I want to start here. This is a thinking person's module, and if your group is a hack and slay gathering, they will be unhappy. In the latter case, it's better to skip the whole thing than come out and tell them that there are a few monsters. It is this writer's belief that brainwork is good for all players, and they will certainly benefit from playing this module, for individual levels of skill will be improved by reasoning and experience. If you regularly pose problems to be solved by brains and not brawn, your players will find this module immediately to their liking. Negotiation of the tomb will require quite a long time, so be prepared to spend several sessions with this module. When the game ends for the day, assume, then some stuff about fairly generous healing, no random encounters. Please read and review all the material herein and become thoroughly familiar with it before beginning the module. Blah blah blah. Avoid facial. So this is an interesting bit. Read aloud appropriate sections, but never give any additional information which player characters would have no way of knowing. And avoid facial expressions or voice tones which might give helpful hints or mislead players. The real enjoyment of this module is managing to cope, and those players who manage to do so even semi-successfully will appreciate you refereeing properly and allowing them to live or die on their own. The starting information for the module depends upon whether you are using the tomb as an insertion in your own campaign, etc. That's a really illuminating thing, because this is a facsimile, in fact, but of the original print from 1978. So this is Gary, not long after Origins 1, where he ran it, saying this is the kind of module this is. And what he says is it's a puzzle that you're meant to think about, that players who like thinking will enjoy. You want to manage player expectations. If they won't enjoy it, don't play it, Don't get upset about it. And almost finally in that context, don't give anything away either way. Don't help them, don't hinder them. You're not an antagonist. You're not their friend. You're a referee. And he uses the old term referee quite correctly there. They will appreciate you refereeing properly. And I think that seems to me to be an important distinction that should inform what we read, is that this is a puzzle which you are to referee, not a thing about killing players. The second thing is from Return to the Tomb of Horrors, which is where I have my facsimile of S1 from. Not a bad way of, if you're looking to get both modules, if you're buying second hand, to buy it like that, so you can get S1 as well. So this is, obviously this is a module by Bruce Cordell, one of his greatest, some would say his greatest, and given he's arguably the greatest adventure designer of all time, that's saying something. Gary writes, 1998, at this point Wizards has bought out Lorraine, and so there is a new relationship between Gary and the makers of the game, and he's invited to write a foreword in this series of returns. There's also, what was it? There's some other returns, weren't there? I'm trying to remember what it was. There's certainly the kind of 90s sequels, like the Against the Giants, Liberation of Jeff, but there was another return as well. It was a long time ago when Tomb of Horrors first made its appearance. Before I put into manuscript form for publication, I carried the scenario around, etc., so as to be ready for those fans who boasted of having mighty PCs able to best any challenge offered by the AD&D game. After an hour or so spent within the weird labyrinth of Acererak's final resting place, the players whose characters were survivors typically remembered suddenly they had pressing engagements elsewhere. Clutching their precious character sheets, they fled the table. Those who'd already lost their vaunted PCs had previously departed, muttering darkly about impossible death traps. Had I been mean and cruel, I would have required participants to hand over their character sheets upon the demise of a PC, torn them up, and then smiled wickedly as I asked the name and address their DM so as to pass on the news of the sad loss. But I am very kind at heart. Why then the scenario in the first place? Thank Alan Lucien for conceiving of such a horrid little adventure. There is a thanks to Alan Lucien somewhere here. Yes, on the front cover. From his basis, I developed the material that was to become the Tomb of Horrors, and I admit to chuckling evilly as I did so. There were several very expert players in my campaign, and this was meant as yet another challenge to their skill and the persistence of their theretofore invincible characters. Specifically, I had in mind foiling Rob Kuntz's PC Robalar and Ernie Gygax's PC Tensor. To make a pair of long tails truncated, Rob, by expending a lot of orc servants, managed to get through to the final encounter, and as the skull of the Demi-Lich rose to assail the one daring violation of his sanctum, Robalar swept all immediately visible treasure into his bag of holding and escaped. Ernie likewise managed to attain the ultimate, destroyed Acererak, and likewise left laden with loot. So I learned a lesson as a dungeon master. Even truly demanding scenarios with PC destruction lurking at every turn of the maze can be overcome by expert players. The PC level and abilities must match the challenges posed, and material resources and spells or magic items, or both sufficient to deal with the demands of the adventure, have to be available. Those given, there is no such thing as impossible. Subsequently, the initial version of the scenario proved that true. And then he says, most who dared the hazard failed, at least in the first go-round, some succeeded. In one tournament use of the setting, a team managed to triumph by using the crown and scepter found earlier as the ultimate tool against the Demi-Lich. As the Acererak's skull levitated, one PC set said crown firmly upon the bony plate, another tapped the regal adornment with the wrong end of the scepter. This is a curse in there that destroys the person so doing. Scratch one Demi-Lich. Russ Stamboard, the DM for the group, was stunned. Could that work, he asked. I shrugged, admitted I certainly hadn't thought of it, but that it was a stroke of genius that deserved reward. Indeed, the worst of situations bring out the best in playing ability. Well tested and already a legend, the adventure was then illustrated to make it easier for the DM to manage. Yes, so it was the first of the adventure. Modules offered by TSR Hobbies Inc. And is a sort of standalone test of playability and PC status. And then talking a bit about how much he likes Return to the Tomb of Horrors. He does highly praise it, obviously he's being paid to, so there we are. He does mention, he says, having written the original work, then designing what I thought of the ultimate in such adventures, the Necropolis campaign adventure for Dangerous Journeys, it seemed like to me I wouldn't be able to say much in the way of a rave, and thence why he thinks it's so good. Now, he's being paid for that, and he's 20 years on, there's going to be some degree of revision, isn't there? Gary was a legend teller, a myth maker. But it rings true, and I certainly, there's no need to disbelieve the individual stories. Basically, he made it, inspired by Alan Lucien to whatever degree he developed it, and it was there to test players, to give them the ultimate test, and particularly to screw over Ernie and Rob. Interestingly, not any of Luke or Jim's characters as other close collaborators in the early days, but to screw over Ernie and Rob. And the assumption there, by the way, is that there's one player running it with their henchmen and with, in Rob Lar's case, loads of orc slaves or hirelings. And they conquered it. And he therefore thinks it's fair. He's like, well, no, people beat it when I ran it. People beat it when Russ Stambour ran it. You know, they came up with a brand new way, which makes sense from how the magic item works, to destroy Acererak. So it can't be unfair. And this means that, yes, though, of course, someone could be playing this, running this to screw players, really, it is to be seen as just the ultimate test of skill. It's for your 15th level characters, or whatever. The pre-gens, and I'll actually start there. The pre-gens, what do they describe on the front? It doesn't give, I think, any levels on the very front. Nope. But the pre-gens are, there's a 14th level MU, 14th level Cleric, 12th level Paladin, 13th level Ranger, 11th level Thief, 8th level Fighter, 8th level Cleric, 6th level Cleric, bunch of multi-classes, 6th level Fighter. So there are some weaker ones in there as well. But in terms of magic, the pre-gens have generally 3 or 4 pieces of magic item each. For instance, +1 Splint, +1 Shield, +3 Spear, Potion of Polymorph. Not very exciting ones on the whole, most of them just pluses, in a very classic 1E way. Though the 1E DMG is the home of, I mean, there's a bit in the LBBs, but the home of classic magic items is the 1E DMG. Nonetheless, the idea that you have a bunch of fairly generic magic items is much more common at that point, even at these high levels. So the assumption is you've got probably a party averaging 12th level or 11th level or something, with some fairly high level ones and a good array of race class combos, and they are going in here at the end of their career, as it were, the final test. And the setup is that there is, for whatever reason, there's a tomb, and the gimmick of the tomb is that it's full of traps, but also full of treasure. And it's important actually that it's full of treasure even if you don't get to the end. There are false hoards, because this is not, as you somewhat see later in some versions of how Acererak is depicted, neither here nor in Tomb of Annihilation, to be fair, is it outright the case that Acererak is just coming up with traps for, you know, craps and giggles. It is that he is he has a purpose. He's defending his remains because he's a lich. He's a demi-lich particularly, and he wants to explore and do lots of stuff in all kinds of planes, and he doesn't want you messing around with his stuff. So he wants to kill you, or he wants to give you treasure to make you think you've solved it and to go away. And I think that's a really interesting and surprisingly naturalistic, in the Gygaxian sense, fantasy naturalism form of module, because rather than having it be that it's just puzzles or everything is made to be like, well, I need to imagine what a real life demi-lich would do. The assumption is, what if a demi-lich wanted to protect their hiding place? Maybe that's the idea Alan Lucian had, I don't know. And on that basis, what things would they put in the way? Lots of deadly traps. There is a degree of kind of mocking and teasing on Acererak's part. There are kind of almost jokes, so maybe that tells you about his personality, but the ultimate purpose is to hide his sanctum so that he is not found and destroyed, and so his most valuable things are not taken. The illustrations, for what it's worth, which are by... do we have credit on the back, or is that a credit on the front? I'm not sure. I'm not sure who the illustrations are by, but the illustrations are nice on the whole. Very, very much 1E. There's Sutherland and Trampier. So yeah, the Daves, at least doing a lot of them, are the ones who... Yeah, that's another Sutherland one there, and actually very Sutherland-esque figures, obviously. There is a reason that Sutherland and Trampier were Gary's favourites early on, I think. So it is a 33-room dungeon. It has, straight up, I'll try to show you there, 3, on the classic blue map, it has 3 entrances, 2 are false. And then, yeah, so here you already have a thing where players have to spend their time scraping and clearing out the openings and then investigating where they're going. And the false ones, one is a collapse trap, 5d10 damage. And for reference, you might expect, I suppose, for that could quite reasonably kill a 14th level MU, you know, or I think it'd struggle to, but it could do. You could quite reasonably have a 14d4 plus 0. It could well be, you know, 35 or something. So you could imagine them getting smashed by that. False entrance tunnel number 2 is they can get blocked into somewhere and get stuck somewhere and have to use spells to get out. Transmute rock to mud, wish, phase door, stone flesh, things like that. Then there is the real entrance, full of pit traps, And again, you can see that, these maps from this era you tend to be very clear. You can hopefully see that despite the reflection. You can see the real entrance in the middle has lots of pit traps, and so you're forcing players to have to actually go the right way. So that's one thing, is it certainly implies some of these things, not all of them, but some of these traps certainly imply mapping or very close attention to description. Then there is the real door is one that seems like it's a fake door or a trap door, something that's going to do something very bad to you. Then there's two other doors or whatever. One is the Arch of Mist, which is one of many such arches. In this case, the Arch of Mist is a good arch. Most of the arches are ones that you pass through. Some of them aren't even hard to get through, but you pass through. You end up back at the entrance naked, and all your stuff gets sent to Acererak's Sanctum. And number 6 is the first green devil face, which is the infamous fixed sphere of annihilation, which destroys those who go within. There are several. This is something which you get the same gags running. The same gag running in Tomb of Annihilation as well, where there are different devil faces have different things going on. So we think of it as the famous one. You go to the end of the corridor. The main one is a big devil face that is black inside, you can't see, and it's a trap. That's a fairly obvious one, let's be honest. It's a sphere of annihilation. You can put stuff in there and you'll find out that it's a sphere of annihilation. And it's fair to say that players who have organically got their characters up to levels 9, 10 plus, or even earlier, will not fall for it, generally. Then there is some, interestingly, at first glance it looks sort of linear. You can see that there's one sort of what looks like one main route through, but there is a bit of looping. There are a couple of ways to get places. There's the Arch of Mist, can take you somewhere else, albeit not somewhere you necessarily want to go, and you've got this kind of loop here, which doesn't go many places, but there are other arches. Then there is this entrance coming through here. There you come back here, and then there are two ways round through there, up, down. So there is some mild looping, but it's not, and I think it's good. Basically, virtually every map can be improved by a degree of non-linearity. What I mean is not to kind of go crazy and make things inorganically non-linear, but a way that players, there's a crumbled wall somewhere. Players can, with careful investigation, break the system, break the simulation. But yeah, no, I like the map, but I don't mind that it's linear, and that one way it works non-linearity is via a sort of intentionally false non-linearity, where you are constantly taken in the wrong direction to dead ends, which seem like the right direction but turn out to be traps, and then you have to go back and find things. So there is a non-linearity, but to do with puzzle solving, not to do with exploration. It is not an exploration module in that sense. In fact, one of the few flaws I'd attribute to it in terms of its difficulty, its unfairness, not its difficulty, it is difficult, but to where it could actually verge on unfair, it really has to do with the number of doors which that are important to find, but which are virtually non-detectable, that require the gem of true seeing you get early on. Detect magic might show there's magic somewhere, things like that. And I think there's a fragility there to it is open to player failure, not based on skill, but not based on skill on the average, but due to not finding a particular item. Nothing is quite singular in terms of its solution. But there are a couple of... The doors are the one place where that does crop up, and we know doors are a great enemy of players. You've got as you go through, the Great Hall of Spheres has all kinds of, spheres, and you can put them into a door, which is a trap. and is the naked and theft trap. There's then this is an interesting early edition one. You cannot imagine, even maybe in Return to the Tomb of Horrors, but even in a Cordell module, this would be a very rare trick, but it's very common in High Gygax, or fairly common in High Gygax, is there's a 3-armed gargoyle which you cannot you can't repair its 4th arm, but you can give it gems, and if it keeps crushing them and you give it enough of them, a magic mouth gives you a which direction you want to go, and gives you the gem of seeing I've just mentioned. There's a complex of secret doors. There's 7 of them, and they each open in different ways, and that is this one here, inside one of which, I think if I recall right, there is a one of them is just a straight up trap and stuff crashes on you, and one of them, as soon as a door is opened into this room, regardless of where you come from, there is a gargoyle. Relatively speaking, there are few monsters, but the monsters are things like a 64 HP, 19 strength, 6 attacks, 12 HD damage, 12 HD creature, doing 2d4 times 4, 3d4 and 1d6, and claw attacks of 2d8, 2d4. Lots of damage on that one. So there is challenge for the hack and slash player, but really the key thing there is to, if you can, it's tough to avoid that one for various reasons, because of the fact that most obvious entrances in here, there is a secret entrance up through here, but you're likely to come in this way, but of course the real expert thing is to either avoid or to freeze. The 3-armed statue is not an enemy. It looks like the 4-armed gargoyle. It is not. It in fact gives you the gem of seeing. There's the chamber of treasure chests, or 3 chests. Is all of these are traps. You assume they're going to be good, but they're not. There is one which has a ring of protection +1 and a clear crystal box, but there are magical darts that fire up as you move it, like it's a crusher plate functionally. That's a fairly common thing as well, and it's interesting that it's how Gary perceives or thinks of high-level adventures. It's worth reflecting on here. High-level adventures are hard. There are few great practitioners of it. The best high-level adventures, I think, that have been written are by Bruce Cordell and by Tony Huso. And there are multiple ways to deal with mid to high-level adventures. Gary writes a lot of very good mid-level adventures. And in some of those, the solution, like WG4, is it? The solution there is to start out with loads of enemies. You get a similar thing in the Shrine of the Kuatoa, D2. In other cases, it's about the essentially it is as simple as, and this can be criticised, and it is more or less what still happens, which is where it gets criticised in, say, in 5th edition, or 4th edition, even worse for this, but where you just get to the point of saying, oh, everything has more damage, more actions. Rarely in the early editions is that they have loads more actions. They may have more attacks, not more action economy in other respects, but it is the case that they will do more damage, and that damage is harder to avoid. Some of it gets simplified down to the math of just they do lots of damage, and that gargoyle is a good example of that. So is the functionally magic missile attacks, which often have a save versus spell to avoid, sometimes don't. They're weaker than magic missiles in that sense, but the idea that essentially you can no longer rely on AC. You have to rely on saves and on things which alter saves rather than stuff that improves AC, because it's unerring. It's essentially something. It's like a guided missile. You have to trick it to get out of the way. I like that. I think it's an interesting, different challenge that targets a different part of the character sheet, and with strong characters, attacking different parts of the character sheet, though sometimes hard. 5th edition makes this, vanilla 5th edition makes this very hard. But attacking different parts of the character sheet is preferable. By that, if anyone's wondering, tiny tangent, it's that some of the saves, basically people can dump stat quite easily based on ability-based saves. So if you are a fighter, there are so few int saves in vanilla 5th that you might as well dump stat to there. The same somewhat with charisma. There are more charisma saves actually, but because of character classes using them. But the same thing is that you're like, how many things will regularly attack me? Wisdom is the equivalent of save versus spells, basically. And actually, I think I put a lot more illusions in my games, which does affect that int save sometimes. But yeah, at this point in an earlier edition, you could just say, well, everyone is really tooled up. Everyone they have good saves, but I'm gonna make them roll enough good saves. Yeah, they've got 8+ save versus spells, great. They've got 10+ save versus spells, great. But they're going to be hit by 4 of these, and so they're going to fail half. They're still going to take damage, and they're going to have to either work out how to avoid that, think, this is a trap, this is obviously a trap, this is really valuable in this chest, I think it's trapped, and then say, well, how do I avoid that? What do we do to get that out? I guess Unseen Servant might work in that case, depending on the weight, but you come up with a solution for that based on your assumptions or your investigations. You know, you work out, is there something detectable? If there's magic missiles there, I don't think it says it's undetectable. You'd assume that detect magic would show up the trap. You know, there's a glowing plate around it. I guess you could then cast Dispel or whatever else on it. Yeah. Chapel of Evil, which seems good but is actually really evil. Archway of glowing orange, which this one is actually, this is a gag one that you get in some, you can definitely see people like Gabor, Lux, and some others. Someone like Chris Kuselik actually as well is very much influenced by this kind of, what bluntly to us comes across as a gag. It's not holy, but it is that the first time you pass through it, your alignment and your sex is reversed. The second time you pass through it, one of them is restored, and the third time the other is, but you take damage. But things can be, basically bad stuff happens to you if you fix it that way. You can just alter reality to get it back, and so on and so forth. You don't lose stuff. You don't permanently lose paladin status based on alignment. So it's somewhat generous there, as it's not a chosen alignment thing. There are more things you can get trapped under, more things you can get trapped behind. A big thing is how often you're going somewhere, as I've already mentioned, and things just start going very wrong. You come through here, you're coming up, oh, this is the obvious way, because this is a secret semi-undetectable door beyond 3 pit traps, 4 pit traps, yeah, and another door here. This then starts sliding off while this locks. It's, you know, tips you into lava. It's a old-fashioned trap, but it's also a tough one. You know, it could be detected really rather too late by a dwarf, but you're going to know that anyway. Really, the investigation is, okay, there's a corridor beyond this, we have to work out what's happening, and we have to be careful, or rather there is a door here and we need to be careful. The idea is that basically once you go in, or once you're at the edge, it starts to be a problem. Yeah, no forcing on knock spells will open it. Disintegrate will, so we're chopping it. Confusion and running away can be heard from the north. All music and singing beyond there has ceased. There's a faint glow. So basically, you've destroyed the door, you go through, audible glamour changes, things change, and you decide you're going to go down, and then it's counterweighted in that case. In the pit traps, it's that you fall through, to correct myself there. So you've got this whole corridor of complete nonsense door traps, which it is going to drain players, and they're going to have to go back and find the secret door, and they have to use basically Gem of Seeing and or Detect Magic, and then use Dispel Magic or remove Curse to allow it to be opened. So it's quite expensive in spells. The Gem of Seeing, by the way, can only be used 12 times, so I think it's 12. So it's also a limited resource. The False Crypt, ton of fear gas, and a programmed illusion where everything starts collapsing, which means players will, and because illusions are real, I guess that can kill people. Illusions are real to the person who believes them. But there is a bunch of stuff. There is a solid gold couch worth 50,000 gold, which you won't take realistically. But there's Jade Coffer, worth 5,000 GP, 6 healing potions. A gemmed crown worth 25,000 GP. A sack with 278 platinum, the equivalent of 290 base in gems, gold pieces, 7 magic user scrolls, and a map showing a fake treasure hoard elsewhere. That's a really good hoard. Your players might find the False Crypt, and there is a thing where how could I forget? There's a lich-like figure with a crown that rises. Who dares to disturb the rest of Acererak? It is your death which you have found, and you show them graphic 18 to make it more convincing. That's what I showed there. And then you defeat him, and it talks to you, and when you destroy it, it collapses, but the place begins to collapse too, and that's when you run away, you steal your stuff, and it's quite good. It's quite good treasure. However, it does point out something as easy as a commune spell will reveal that it hasn't destroyed Acererak. So if your mission is to destroy Acererak, you haven't got it. You might be very pleased. It's not a humiliating haul to come away with, say, if you get the normal portable stuff, you know, you could come away from that room alone with up to 40,000, 50,000 XP. But that's not that much compared to what you could get. And you're 14th level, remember. There's a lab with mummies being prepared. Again, I think that's the one where a mummy can come out, pop out and attack you if you disturb it. Oh no, that's not that one. There is one where you can get a key. Then there's a pit with 200 spikes. Again, this is stuff where the job is to avoid it, to work out a way to get through. Basically, it's that there's no way to jump across. You can climb down in, but there is a pressure plate functioning which causes spikes to charge upwards, and each person in the pit or leaning over gets hit by 1d4 plus 1 spikes, each causing 1d6 hit points of damage, no saving throw. And essentially that's infinite. So I guess theoretically, those people who've got that far could get up. But realistically, you need magical means to get across it, and players have to either work it out, discover that, or learn the hard way and then solve the problem. So it's a puzzle, but it's not an environmental puzzle in the way it seems. It's not just a case of like, okay, well, we've got to do this. It's a way where you need to try to avoid it. There's a cavern of gold and silver mist with a good siren. So this is one thing. Even in this module, there is an interactable friendly. She's a good siren who cannot tell you under what curse she is. And she can't explain what she needs, but if you ask her to come with you, she can, and she's freed. There are also 2 sacks next to her, a large one and a small one. The large one has small numbers of coins, but is a bag of holding. And the small sack can be filled with wool or some piece of jewellery, or it can actually have some decent stuff in it. But it's not massively lucrative. The real lucrative prize there is the non-obvious solution to the siren, who will then come and help you. Or rather, that is really compared to the relative values of these other things. A small bag of holding isn't that bad. A ring of featherfall is good. Brace of defense AC 6 is fine, but a bunch of the pre-gens come with better than that. You could get 4,800 in gem. You know, it's not that exciting, basically. There's decent stuff there, but really you want to get the siren. It's not possible to gain both the large and the small sacks. Yeah, you can't actually... if you touch her, you become an idiot, but she can cause that. She can cure it. And the 2 sacks with her, both of which will disappear if she's asked to accompany the party, or you can take one. So yeah, it's choose one of the 3. Then there are lots more doors. Then you start getting into the end game. More door traps, more door puzzles. And then you get into this section. So the siren is there. This section is where Acererak, his stuff is. And there are 2 devil faces. One of which neither is a killer. One of which is one of which is, they're both traps basically, but they are different traps. One of which is a steal stuff, send you naked to the entrance. The other of which is get dumped in a incredibly hard to get out of room. Yeah, the Chamber of Hopelessness, which is just south of that, I think. Basically, if you open the door, you get attacked by loads of swords and shields, and it's very hard. You know, you're being attacked by loads of really tough attackers, and you're probably likely to have to stay there. There is some decent stuff in there, to be fair. There's a potion of diminution, 2d10 cheap gems, and a +1 flail. So it's worth getting there in some sense, isn't it? There is, yeah, then there's a couple more rooms with different ways to deal with, well, there's the flying swords and shields which are attacking you, and he gives detailed examples of how spells affect that. There's 29, the vows of mithril. The big thing is blood starts gushing forth, and there's a detailed list of spells that can help with that. Cure critical wounds or other wounds or heals. Cone of Cold freezes it for 3 rounds, so if you cure it, that's good. If you Cone of Cold it, then it's frozen for a while. If you create water, it turns to normal water. Disintegrate destroys it. Levitate turns it into a huge red ochre jelly. Polymorph turns it into whites, so you don't want to cast everything on it. Purify water turns it to a gas which weakens you to 3 strength for 1 day. That's harsh. Raised Air / Res makes there a shade there who heals your 10 last hit points. You get 10 HP back basically, and you're completely refreshed, which I'm not clear. I assume that doesn't include spells, but it could do hypothetically. It's just you haven't spent the time memorizing. So fire turns it into a fatal poison gas. So that's a really interesting puzzle right at the end, something where again you can get good stuff out of this. That it is never, and the Siren is a good example of this. So is the False Crypt even where it's tricking you, or where there are really deadly things going on, or the puzzle is really hard. There are always ways to get something good out of the situation, pretty much. And there are always ways, once you know how old school dungeons work, there are always ways to suspect that something funny is going on. And I think that's the training he's looking for. Those are the players he's looking for, is people who know that's the challenge, that's what you're playing. Final False Treasure Room, so the second one, which does include some okay stuff. There are iron chests with 10,000 copper pieces that are like platinum. That's a bit naff, to be fair. But then the other is 10,000 gems, which appear to be not less than 50 GP value. Each is actually 1 GP quartz gem. You're still getting 50,000 GP out of that, albeit it's very heavy. That you find what you think is Acererak's tomb, with the broken stuff, the Magi, that's worthless. And there is an option, the bronze urn, and if you do not knock it, there is an Efreet who'll give you 3 services. Again, there's good stuff in virtually every place. And this is a generous module. It is not a harsh module. It is not one that says, look, here's nothing, go forth and enjoy. It's a very generous module. Then, question mark, a phase pit. Then the final secret door, which you need to use the 2 keys on in the right order on the final 2 doors, either final secret door and then the crypt itself. Then the crypt. The crypt has... it has a big encounter with Acererak, which I'll get to in a moment to finish. But it has all items that you are teleported nude away from. 97 base 10, 3 base 10 GP. Obviously, the point is that can be higher. And 3 huge gems, which are worth 160,000 between them. 12 potions, 6 scrolls, determined randomly. A ring, rod, staff, and 3 miscellaneous magic items, again, generated randomly. A +4 sword of defending, 2 cursed swords, and 1 cursed spear of backbiting. So there's some bad stuff too. But that is, at that point, you are talking about, compared to the False Crypt where you might get 50 or 60, at this point you're really hoping for about 300 or 4,000 XP from the treasure in the room. I guess it depends on what items you get. And if you keep them, then, yeah, maybe you're looking at more like 250. The Demi-Lich, a big thing here is that, at first... it's more or less an illusion. It's dust. It seems to be attacking you and annoying you. And if you do 50 energy factors, and basically that depends on how much you attack it or what spells you cast on it, it turns into a ghost, statistically, who is controlled by Acererak. And the ghost attacks immediately. And so the suggestion is the ghost is probably going to form because the dust will look like it's damaged, he points out. If you touch the Demi-Lich itself, the skull, Acererak rises just takes over someone's body and drains more souls until all 6 of its diamond teeth are shattered, which allow it to drain 6 souls, so it's pretty deadly and you can't do very much. However, and then it curses everyone else to leave. However, you can damage the skull. So the trick is you go in. The ideal thing, the end game, is you take the stuff, you do not touch the floating dust, and the skull you don't touch, but you do particular spells and attacks on to destroy it. With that, if you are suspicious of the dust and if you wait to see its evil intent, if you do that, then because you won't get hurt, you won't attack it, and so you won't get the ghost. If you are cautious of the fact that you think finding here is the Demolich's skull, you won't touch it, and so you'll start thinking of how to destroy it. Most things do not damage it, but Forget spell does. Shatters do. I mean, in fact, a Forget causes it to sink down. A Shatter spell causes 10 HP each. Power word kill, pronounced from astral or ethereal magic user, destroys it. Fighters, rangers, and paladins with particular weapons can. Exorcise causes it to sink down. Dispel evil does damage. Holy word does 20. 20 out of 50 damage as well is a lot. And a thief slinging one of the large gems found in the crypt will inflict 1 HP per 10,000 GP of damage, i.e. 1, 5, or 10. But the gem is thereby shattered, and even misses must be saved for. So that one's a bit more fringe. That is a bit like, here's a dumb door you can't find. There are a couple of puzzles or solutions like that which aren't unfair in the sense of they're cheating you, but are so lateral, relatively speaking. On the other hand, sometimes players accidentally do these things. I say this, got a player in a Deadlands game once, Jamie, who plays in my stream, who was trying to work out what to do with an Aztec mummy in Misa. Was like, we have to smash the gem, and was like, I don't know what to smash the gem with, and so smashed a whiskey bottle he had, just to kind of create enough impact. Yeah, so you get the idea. He is AC -6, 50 HP, very tough, and sucks souls into special gems, yeah, there we go. And they can potentially come back if you destroy the Demilich. So there, again, the final thing, he does then suggest giving 100,000 extra XP as the price, as Acererak's own XP. That is, I guess, and that's adapting to the fact that he hadn't made a stat block for Infamous Demilich. I don't know if Return has. I'll check. I don't know if. Yeah, they suggest, nevertheless, PCs who destroy the phylactery earn 70,000 extra. So, man, deflation over time. These liches are getting easier to kill all the time. So, I think it's very interesting. It's got lots of interesting puzzles that you can learn from. It has some signs of, and you can tell from what he describes about Ernie and Rob playing it, is really it's a game which is about not quite brute forcing it. It is about brain rather than just throwing stuff in. But Roblar brings all these orcs. You basically have a thing where you're like, okay, how do I use my resources, henchmen, magic items, spells, to take risks to solve the stuff that's hard to find out, and so that I am not constantly risking my PC in impossible puzzles or things that are very dangerous. It is not auto kill. It is not something that every party that goes in should expect everyone to die. In fact, not just from his own witness to early games, but from a fair face value fair read, it's eminently solvable if you understand what you're getting yourself into. And I think it generally does that well. There are a couple of things that if I were designing a module meant to be like that, you know, I want to make a top tier player challenge, brain challenge, therefore PC killer, because it's such a brain challenge, I wouldn't include the infinite invisible doors, or fairly very narrow routes to find the right exits and entrances in a way that is likely to be frustrating. Especially, this is one thing, you're playing it with Rob Kuntz or Gary Gygax. You play with them several times a week anyway. It's just you and them. You're having a really enjoyable one-on-one experience with one of your best friends or your son. That's very different to I'm playing this with 6 players in a campaign, and particularly in a campaign as opposed to a one-shot. There has to be some sense that the module is open to players finding the solutions, and in 1 or 2 cases it's not unfair, but it is very difficult in a way that is going to be, as I say, frustrating for those kinds of groups. Beyond that, I think it's a great module. I don't know if it's not one of my favourite modules because it doesn't, I think though I like the Gygaxian naturalism involved in what would a Demi-Lich's weird tomb be like. I like puzzles. I'm not as much of a high puzzle DM and sort of big logic problem puzzle solving modules. And so in that sense, for Gary, I would look towards the D series. I think the D series is probably my favourite by him, as somewhat T1 to 4 as well, for the kind of what scratches my Gygax itch. What is your favourite Gygax module? What do you think of Tomb of Horrors if you've read or run it? I'd love to hear in the comments what you think. Till next time.